chance to have a lady come here that you brought in, spoke up in Fredonia, and then went down to the Jackson Center.
And gave you a piece of Hitler's desk.
Yeah, and her name was
Linda Holmes.
Linda Holmes. How did you find out about her?
Well, I was in Florida. In the newspaper, I saw a little blurb on her book, Unjust Enrichment. And it was published in 2001. And I became very interested in it, so I called the library in Florida and said, "Do you have?" "Oh, we just got that book in yesterday," the guy said. So I said, "Hold on to it. Just hold it for me," and he did. So I ran down to the library and got it. And you know, Greg, sometimes you just put a book down and it opens up to a page. I did. I got that book back, opened it up, and chapter 8, Mitsubishi, Empire of Exploitation. I just started reading it. And she talks about a POW camp in northern Japan, in the mountains, in a copper mine which hadn't been used in years and years. And I said, "My God, that's where my brother was." And I asked him. He's I don't remember the name of the town, but he was up in the northern Japan in Honshu, and anyway, I tried to visit there when I was in Japan, but I couldn't make it. But at any rate, he got through, and so I'd been the program chair for Fredonia Rider for Veterans Day for the Fredonia Rotary for many, many years. And this year, I said, "What am I going to do for an encore, you know?" And Linda, I wonder. So I called her. We'd struck up at that point what I call a pen pal relationship. And I called her, and she said, "Of course I'll come." Oh. I said, "What about an honorarium?" "An honorarium? What's that?" So we just arranged it, and as you know, we put it together, and then she told her about the Jackson Center, and she said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I have a piece of marble from Hitler's desk in Birch's Garden." "You do?" "Yeah." Well, she came about this by her father was an AP correspondent, not in the war, he was here, but one of his very good friends was an AP correspondent in Europe and in Germany and all that stuff. So he was there when you took a sledgehammer to Hitler's desk, and he got a couple of pieces of this thing, and he gave one to Linda. She said, "Hey, the Jackson Center is a good place for it." So I'm glad it worked out.
It worked out great.
Yeah.
And she came down and wowed everybody. We did an event. In fact, it was an interview event. I think that's what we did. We interviewed her there.
It was the same day that we had her in Fredonia.
Exactly.
Later in the afternoon.
Yeah, you worked her pretty hard. And I kept in touch with her. She writes back and forth occasionally. Tell me about your brother's story. Obviously, he ended up in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. What was his backstory?
His backstory was he was on MacArthur's staff. Not anything up, but he was a member of the staff. And they were in Manila. And then as things got hot in Manila, they moved to Corregidor. And then, of course, that's where MacArthur left from Corregidor. And my brother did not go with him, obviously. So when the Japanese took over captured Corregidor, he was captured there. It's interesting, we mentioned my brother was a Japanese prisoner. Anytime you say that, "Oh, he was in the death march." No, he was not in the death march. He was captured on Corregidor. So that was it, and he was there. And
how long was he there for?
Totally?
Yeah. Well, in camp, in prison war.
Well, 3.5 years.
Wow.
The war, the Philippines fell in April of whatever year it was, 1942, I guess. No, 43 it would be. 42.
42,
yeah. And in April, early May, Bataan fell in April, and Corregidor fell early May, and that was when he became a POW. And then he was there for a while, and then on one of the hell ships to Japan, and from there up to city, a town called Hanawa up in northern Japan, and the copper mine. And he said, they were deep in, the guys were down in the copper mine, and they thought they were doing me a favor by letting me stay up on top. And they weren't. I was cold. It was colder than hell. And you didn't get sick. You got sick, missed work, you didn't get fed. And it was pretty rough. But he came out with a legally blind eyesight from malnutrition, and took a couple of bashes in the face. His nose was broken over it. But anyway, he made it through. And I came home in late 45, and that's his story. Now, Kidder has his story in his book. And I'll never forget when Raleigh interviewed him. I was with him. I set up the interview for him. It was interesting. I bumped into Raleigh one day, and he talked to me. He was on a 90 Minutes commission then. He said, I just got back from the cemetery on Corregidor. I said, oh, that's interesting. My brother was captured on Corregidor. Oh, was he a POW? I don't have a POW in my book. So the second edition, so he came over and interviewed my brother. And first time I saw my brother cry. He just broke down. 50 years, you know. But it went well. And he's devoted stories in his book, Hometown. Hometown went to war. And that's how we got there.
Now, in the family itself, what are you, Rocky? You had 4 brothers?
I have 4 brothers. There are 5 of us. Yep. I'm number 4.
Okay.
And my younger brother was 5, and he was in Korean. He wasn't there, but he was enduring the Korean.
That's David?
No, that's Frank. David was older.
Okay.
David was a Marine, and he went in 42.
Okay.
And then Tony, David, Joe, who was a Navy corpsman in the Navy in the Pacific. His ship was a ship that put Ernie Pyle ashore when he was killed in Hiroshima, right off of Iwo Jima. And so that was Tony, who was in POW, then David, a Marine. And he never saw any action, but he was lucky. He didn't. He was on his way to Guadalcanal, and ship stopped in Hawaii, and they were looking for particular skills and grabbed him, and he had it rough. He spent the war in Hawaii. But my brother in the Navy, he saw a bit of action, and then me, and then my younger brother in the Korean War. He was in during the Korean War. So we had 5 boys in the family, and all 5 of us served, which I'm very proud of, you know. And anyway.
Was that tough on your mom?
Yes, very tough. And we didn't know for approximately 2 years. I don't remember exactly, but 2 years that he was a POW. All we knew officially was listed as missing in action. And then it was a couple of years, about 2 years, I think. We got a postcard from the Red Cross or somebody that he had written, and that's when we knew that he was alive.
So did you suspect he was dead?
We didn't know.
Yeah.
Missing in action for 2 years. What are you going to think?
Yeah, that's right.
But my mother took it very hard. Well, she was, anyway. And I was home.
How about your dad? What do you do for a living?
My dad worked in at that time, the Dunkirk Radiator. He was in charge of what they call the cupola, where they throw in all of the raw materials, and in the bottom comes out the molted stuff for their So he worked there. In fact, I have a story I like to tell about that. It was, of course, during the war, early days of the war, and came home one day from school, and I said to my mother, I quit school. Oh, well, you're in trouble. The right. You're in trouble. Right? No, I'm no trouble. Okay. So my father came home from 10 or 12 hours in the radiator, and tell your father what you told me. No, here it comes. Here comes the earthquake. So I told him, and he was very quiet at home. Interesting. What are you going to do? I said, well, I'll get a job. Do you have a job? No. Okay, that was all. I said, whoa. 5 o'clock in the morning. Hey, wake up. Well, before that, I used to go down to one of the local Coke places and had a couple of Cokes. I shouldn't put that on camera, though. But Wake up. What's the matter? You quit school? Yeah. You're going to go to work? Yeah. You don't have a job? No. Come with me. I need a helper. So we marched down the Dunkirk radiator at 6 in the morning. At 11 o'clock, I was back in school. So you talk about, what the old guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah.
So that's how I got back in school, and the rest is history.
Your third brother, the one that was in the Navy, you talked about that Ernie Pyle incident.
Yeah.
What does he remember of that?
Well, he was on the ship, and his ship, Ernie Pyle.
This is in the Pacific.
Yes.
Pacific, yeah.
Ernie Pyle, as you know, was in Europe, and then when the war ended in Europe, he went to the Pacific. He went to see what it was like out there. And he was on this, Joe, my brother, was on a baby carrier, and was CVEs are officially called. And Pyle was transferred to that. How he got there, I don't know. But and they put him ashore. They say he died and he got killed at Iwo Jima. It wasn't Iwo Jima, it was Ieshima,
Yeah.
a little island right off the coast. So that's what his recollection of Ernie Pyle was. He was a corpsman, my brother was a corpsman, and tended to a lot of wounded guys coming ashore. And then he was on a hospital ship after that. So, anyway.
How did you feel? I mean, here now you're the fourth, and were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted. I figured out of high school, I figured I would be drafted. Why wait?
Right.
So, and that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. What I didn't know at the time.
This would have been what year?
45.
Okay.
It was a blessing in disguise. Because I didn't know at the time, but as it turned out, when a little conflict called Korea came along, guys who were in the reserves got immediately called up. And I was regular Army, because I enlisted, I was RA.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about it. I mean, Korea, I didn't go in. But the guys, I knew a lot of guys who were in my outfit who got called in. The fact that I enlisted was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
Or I'd have been called to Korea during the Korea conflict.
Now this sort of 45, you enlist. Where did you do boot camp?
Fort Dix, New Jersey,
Fort Dix?
for 7 weeks or 8 weeks, and from there I had to leave and then out to California and out of San Francisco and on the good old U.S. Army troop ship General Black.
General Black.
31 days from San Francisco to Yokohama.
Oh my gosh.
We ran through the tail end of a typhoon and couldn't get out of it. Of course, as you know, in those days there was no satellites or weather things. You just hit the tail end of the typhoon and we were there, booming. 7 days.
What was that like? I mean, my God.
Rough.
Were you sick?
I was not sick. Most of the guys on the ship were not sick. We're too damn scared. Really, we were scared to death. When we were up, my group was up in the bow, and number 2 hatch, which was right up in the bow. That bow would come out of the water, boom, boom, boom. But we were too afraid to be sick. I had another experience too, when I was deathly afraid of becoming seasick. So from San Francisco, actually up Camp Stone, and up the river, Sacramento River from Frisco, is where Camp Stone was. It still is, I don't know. Took the ferry from there down to the port and then got on the ship. And we got on the ferry and I'm looking, are we moving yet? This is on the river. Are you moving yet? So we got down the ferry and crossed through anyway, on the ship. And away we went. Now talk about getting seasick. Another reason why I didn't get seasick, I was definitely afraid of it. So we got underway. We're saying we're allowed to go up on deck. And I was standing up on deck with a buddy. Oops, there goes the bridge. Wonder when we'll see that again. And the water was very clear.
San Francisco?
Yes, the Golden Gate Bridge. And the water was, just very calm. I looked down at the water, I looked up the bridge, I looked at the water, boom, I was sick. For 3 days.
Yeah.
I got up on the morning and I'm not sick. And I wasn't after that. So we rode out the typhoon, but anyway, that was a big typhoon.
Did you know what your destination was at that time?
All we knew was, the ship was loaded with guys from Japan, or going to Japan, and to Korea.
Right.
But we didn't know. When we got to Japan, we didn't get off the ship. I mean, those of us who were going into Japan.
So this would have been latter part of 45?
Yeah.
How did you know the atomic bombs had been landed? You know, because you're obviously heading towards a potential invasion of Japan.
Well, the war was over by that point.
Okay.
The war was over, and the bomb was dropped in early August.
Okay.
And the Japs finally surrendered about the middle of August. So I didn't leave until late September.
Now, would you be part of the occupation? Was
Yes.
that the idea? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I was there for 20 months.
Wow.
Got out early because my enlistment, I had enlisted for 2 years, but they cut it short because of whatever reason. I got home 2 days before Christmas.
In
46.
1946?
No, 47 that was now. 47.
So what was your duties there when you got the... Were you in Tokyo? Were you...
I saw Tokyo, but we went way down south.
Okay.
Southern island of Kyushu, in a city called Beppu. I was a rifleman or infantryman in the 19th Infantry Regiment, 24th Infantry Division. So it came a point, I was like, I'm tired of this. You know, and of course, when you go to town, you had to have the buddy system. You had to go with a buddy, and one of you always carried a sidearm. We were afraid, you know, that, as it turned out, there were never, ever, that I know of any incidents of GIs on the league downtown getting or just going to town for any incidents. But
What was the reaction among the natives? Was there any fraternization to speak of?
no, it was very calm. If I go on with my story, and I'll tell you, it'll come up.
Okay.
After a while of running, carrying a rifle, as they call it, I heard about a vacancy in the post office. So I talked to a guy who I knew, and he said, just go tell him he worked in the post office during Christmas vacation. I tried it, and they took me in. So I spent 6 to 8 months in the post office. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we did, we were in, on the island of Kyushu, and once a week, we would travel up to Yokohama, 22nd Base Post Office, get the mail, bring it back, take our mail up, and bring the mail back. And we had the duty to do that every go up to division headquarters and then up to Yokohama. But that was interesting. At that time, there were the transportation in Japan was strictly by rail. Mm-hmm. One rail lines from town to town to town. And that's the way we traveled. But here I was with a big car, regular big car with 15 or 20 bags of mail, and coming back the same way. And we could not let any of the people on the car, the Japanese, and they tried to get on the car from the platform, and we couldn't let them on. We carried a 45. But the 45 didn't scare them. One day when I had to run, our 45 was in ordnance for something, so I was carrying a carbine. And they really tried, they didn't care about the carbine, didn't bother them. They wanted to get on the ship or on the rail car. Yeah. But that was a very interesting duty because as you pulled into a town, the people are jammed in. It's the only one method of transportation. And I got to see this old gentleman being wrestled around. I know one day he was left on the platform, couldn't get on the car. So sometime later I saw him and, well, I'm going to break the rules. I took him on the car. Turned out he spoke English. And he was some sort of college professor or whatever they call him over there. So we had quite a number of conversations. And one of the things he said to me, which I've never forgotten, we are very patient people. Yes, we lost, we got beat, but we'll try again. We firmly believe that our emperor sits on the throne of the sun god. Okay? So recently, within the last year or so, when Japan has been kind of rearming itself and that, I did a paper in college. I became very interested in the Far East because of my time and my brother Tony's time in there. And I did a paper on Japan, and in it I said, well, I recounted this incident with this elder gent. And I said, well, I believe that they will try again. And from what's been happening in the last year or so, or less or more, whatever, you know, and I got furious when a year or so ago when I picked up the newspaper and saw that the Japanese were making a shrine out of this place that had been a prison camp in Yokosuka, or whatever it was. So, anyway, I won't be around to see it probably, but we will see.
Was there conversation in Japan about the decision of MacArthur not to prosecute Hirohito?
Not much. He was ordered not to. And the other side of that is the Japanese war crimes compared to Robert Jackson in Germany was a sham. And we were not allowed. In fact, my brother Tony had to sign a piece of paper which says he would not discuss what happened in PW camp.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And,
By whom? Who asked him to do that? The military?
None of the Americans, yeah.
Wow.
Because the reason for it, as I found out later, in fact, Linda Holmes told me that we wanted to make a friend out of Japan, and the Russians were still, that was during the Cold War, and we bordered on northern Japan where the Russians were bordered on too, on the other side. So we were afraid of the Russians invading Japan, so we wanted to make an ally of them, and we did, of course. But as a result of that, in Germany, the German government, after the war, paid reparations to POWs, civilians, and the Japanese never did. And our government, like Linda Holmes, has done a lot of work on that. And the stories that she tells about trying to get the Japanese to own up, or not the Japanese government, but the companies, Mitsubishi and Honda, you know, the big Japanese, which in the title of her book, the first book, or actually it was her second book, Unjust Enrichment, subtitle, How Japanese Companies Laid the Groundwork for Their World War II Expansion with the use of POWs, American POWs. And that's true. I know my brother in the copper mine digging out copper or whatever. So, but there was when we were there was never one incident between the Japanese or the Americans.
Now, at that time of occupation, MacArthur had really set forth the rules upon which to live by. And also, was he part of the writing the new constitution for Japan? There was part of that going on too, I think.
Yes, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I found this out later when I was in college and took a few courses on Japanese history and that. But yes, he had to approve everything.
Right.
But again, he was under a lot of pressure to not to do anything.
Right.
And of course, he had his own trials in the Philippines, where they tried some of the Japanese military and did execute a few of them. But then in Japan, by the time MacArthur did this very early in the post-war period. Then by the time they got to Japan, and of course the viewership came down, no more. So.
Yeah, the Yamashita and Homa.
Yeah, Homa.
Yeah.
The butcher of Manila, or whatever he was called, yeah. And Yamashita the same way.
Yeah, they were quick trials.
Yeah, in Japan, in Japan, in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Or in the Philippines.
Philippines, yeah. They were sort of short, I don't say short trials, but they were, it happened quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So did you ever sit down after the war? I mean, here you had 4 of your brothers, yourself included, saw service during World War II, and your 5th one in Korea. Did you guys have a reflection on the whole military?
Not really. Except for my number 1 brother, who was a POW. We talked a lot about him, and of course he couldn't handle the weather here. And he became very ill and went to California, and he spent most of his most were years in California until he got older, and he went to St. Columban's. But my parents gave him the house, and he had that to fall back on. He never married, but we never talked too much about the war. We didn't.
Was that by design, or was it hard to do, or
No,
was it just another chapter?
Just didn't do it.
Yeah.
Except, as I said, when Raleigh Kidder interviewed him for his book. But Joe talked a lot about, he became a corpsman, he was a corpsman, and he didn't have too much to say. And it's interesting, I see now with a lot of people, guys, even from World War II and even earlier, who have mementos, uniforms, things. We don't have a single thing. Mm-hmm. I don't have a single piece of uniform. The only thing I have is a set of pearls that I bought in Japan and brought home from my mother. And now my wife has them.
Yeah.
But they're real pearls. But we got home, we got out of the army, and out of the military, and that was it.
Were you treated specially when you came back, or there were so many military guys who came back, they were just...
Just walked the street, it was accepted.
Yeah.
We didn't have the, as we're doing today, which I certainly agree with, making a lot of big deal about guys in the military, not girls and women. But back then it was accepted. Yeah. During the war, we had, as I remember correctly, 15 million men and women under arms. So it was a pretty sizable sum. And we just accepted what was and got on with our lives. So.
Was there, obviously up here in Dunkirk, Fredonia, you lost just young folks just like every other community. Sure. What was the, how did the community react to this? Was it just, you remember?
Well, they reacted to the war. But I don't think they reacted specifically to people in the military. Of course, if you remember the Legion post in Dunkirk, Aquavia post. Well, he was in the Philippines. He was captured in Corregidor. And my brother used to call him the wild man. But then the story goes the way a day or two after when they were captured, they herded everybody down. There was a seaplane base there. And the big ramp where the ships or the planes would come up on. And they were all herded down there for a couple of days. The Japanese didn't know what to do with them all. They just herded them there. Well, Frank Aquavia, and my brother found this out later, he didn't know him at that time. Well, he knew him, but he wasn't involved with him. He and a friend had stashed some food back in the camp. So they took off one night to go get this food they had stashed. Japanese guards saw him, whether it was before or after, I don't recall. Okay. And he was shot and killed with another guy. So he was one of the first casualties. And that's why they named the Aquavia post the first Legion, not the first one. There was Post 62 was the first Legion post. So I think back it was an interesting time. I was still in high school for most of it, all of it, the war itself. Playing football and,
Do you have a recollection of December 7th, 1941?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I remember my brother was in the Philippines then. And I was, Sunday afternoon, I was in the movie to show double features. There were movies in town. So I came out of the movie, there was a lot of on the street, chatter, what's happening? The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. So I ran home, and of course Pearl Harbor was attacked. With the Philippines be far behind. And they weren't, of course. So I got home, my mother and father were given to the radio, and that was it. And got on with our lives, and of course my mother was very taken back and, very distraught until found out that he was a POW and not dead. And she died shortly after he came home, but he did come home and she did see him.
Do you suspect that there was a causal relationship there
Where?
between your mother's health and kind of the
I don't.
anxiety?
Who knows? You know, it could be, but she became ill, and you know, she became ill, and one night she had a stroke. And that was it. But she kept pretty much herself, except I would catch her crying. But I don't. Obviously, it bothered her.
Sure.
David was gone. Joe was gone. Tony, we know, God knows where he was. And I was home through most of it. And I was the guy who got the telegrams.
Yeah.
That was brutal. Missing in action.
But what was the reaction when you finally got the note that from him, from your brother?
A postcard.
Yeah.
Well, obviously it was still a POW. And so we knew that wasn't going very well. But we were relieved. At least he was alive. But when the war ended and he came home, wow. You know.
Well, describe that. When he comes, were you there when he came home?
I was there and I left within a week. He came here in U.S. from Japan on a troop ship, or some sort of a ship, I shouldn't say, probably a troop ship. And he went into Seattle, not Frisco. So he was sent to Rome, New York, an Army hospital in Rome, and he came through Dunkirk on the train, you know, and that was for him. We got one weekend he was allowed to come home. By that time his eyesight had pretty much gone. He was able to see. He was able to read large print books very close, you know. And he loved to read. He read like voraciously. But he got home one weekend and it was, you know, a wild time.
Wow.
But then he went back and then I left. And so
and your other two brothers are still gone.
still gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, I said, had it rough in Hawaii
Yeah.
for 4 years. It's almost 4 years. And
Yeah.
Joe saw his share of action.
Do people ask you, because I mean, so much of your life, whether through yourself, post-war occupation in Japan, your brothers, and certainly the Korea, which was a set of that. What's the legacy of that time period? I mean, what do we learn? And
Well, I don't know what I learned. I know I went through it. Obviously, I learned something. What I don't know, but we just, as I say, when it's over, we're done with, goodbye. That was the attitude, I think, of most of the people, most of the guys that I knew and were older than me and went through hell. And they just, just get on with it. We did what we had to do, and let's get back to work. I think that was the thing. There were no big deals made. There were no parades, they had parades on the holidays, of course. A big one coming up this week. But there was not much made of it. Last year in Florida, I saw a little blurb in the paper where Naples High School was doing a lot of research. They were doing units in the high school on World War II. And they had pretty much digested it, for lack of a better term, World War II. And now they think they were looking for people who were in high school during the war, wanted to get our reaction. So I called the number, and sure enough, so I went down to Naples High School. And it was very interesting. These kids, they said, "No, don't prepare any stuff. We have the questions we want to ask." And it was very interesting. They had the questions. First question they asked was, "Where were you on December 7th?" And I've already answered that. But it was interesting, and these kids were truly interested, truly concerned, and I was really proud of Naples High School for doing that. It was a teacher, actually was a librarian, who put it all together.
what was the surprising question? Since you didn't get the questions in advance, so they were extemporaneous.
There really weren't any surprising questions. Where were you on December 7th? What about your experience? And they just questioned that kind of thing. And there weren't any loaded questions or anything They were rather simple questions.
You you were at home at the time when President Roosevelt passed away.
Yes, yes.
What was the community reaction to that?
Very bad. I mean, yeah, I guess it was bad. It was very. What do we do now? We've lost our leader, and it was not a good time. It was a bad time. I mean, poor guy, right or wrong, did not live to see the results of his work, for lack of a better term.
Now, VE Day was
Europe.
soon June.
Europe.
Yeah, in Europe. Was that a celebratory place in Dunkirk, Fredonia?
Not much.
You didn't.
It was, the spring before, the year before, spring before, whenever it was. I know it was in the spring. And yeah, we celebrated. Yeah, we said, yeah, wow. But we still got that thing going on over there.
Yeah.
And people, we had a lot of people from our community who were in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of roughly how many out of the total number were in Europe, but the majority of them were in the Pacific.
Yeah.
So we were mostly concerned about that. And then my brother, the oldest brother, who was in the POW camp, of course, that was a big thing. But the VE Day was, I remember being in school and we never even got the day off.
Really?
But at any rate,
What's the question I should be asking, Rocky Doino?
I really don't know, Greg. What's the question I should be asking? I should be asked. Do you have any regrets? Do you hate the Japanese?
Good questions.
I don't know.
Well, did your brother? Let's ask that question.
He addressed that with us, and I told you he lived in San Francisco for all through the winter, and then he come back in the summer. But he knew he had some Japanese friends in San Francisco, and as you know, the big Japanese community there in that whole West Coast. He said, well, we got along well, but one day over a glass of wines, I don't think I can ever forgive him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who did, like, who's the guy now who just died? The book that Hildebrand wrote, Unconquered, or whatever.
Louis Zamperini.
Yeah, Zamperini, Unconquered, or something.
Yeah.
He had quite a story.
Boy, did he ever. We almost got him to the Jackson Center.
Oh, really?
A couple years ago. He's born in either Olean or Salamanca, New York.
Yeah,
And we thought that was the hook.
yeah,
Come back home.
Yeah.
He hadn't been back home since, age 4. Anyway, it's just obviously.
that would have been good.
That would have been good.
Yeah.
Do you have any, since you asked the question, do you have any regrets?
Do I have any regrets? Not really. Personally, because I never got shot or shot at or at POW camp. But I feel for my brother, and I feel for my mother, who literally went through hell.
Mm-hmm.
I've told you how Tony felt. I don't have any personal feelings about the Japanese, but as a group, or as a religion, who believe they belong on the throne of the world, which we've talked about.
Right.
And I fear for my grandchildren,
Right.
Well,
Are they interested, by the way?
I'm sorry.
Are your grandchildren, do they ever come up and say, Grandpa, tell me about World War II?
Yes, my grandson, I've got a boy and a girl. The boy is 8 and the little girl is 5. I took her down to the Vets Museum in Dunkirk at the point, and her brother, her half-brother, step-brother, and she was very interested.
Mm-hmm.
And she would look at these things and so forth. And it was amazing how much she asked a lot of questions. And now my grandson, the kid is extremely interested in history. He was 8 years old and started about 2 years ago. One day he came in, now he lives in Syracuse. Told me, he said, Grandpa, who won the Battle of the Little Bighorn? What? Oh, you know the little bighorn, the Indians and the General Custer. I said, well, the Indians did. I thought, that started it. So every time I see him, we have a little history lesson.
No, isn't that wonderful?
We go up in the Adirondacks with the family every summer, and where my wife comes from. And he just loves to talk about the war, and he tells people his grandpa was in the war. And I said, Tyler, I was not in the war, I was in the service, and so forth. The other thing about him is Tony had 2 Purple Hearts he was awarded. And one is in his display at the Vets Museum. And the guy who used to run the Vets Museum was since passed. I can't think of his name. I know him well. So after Tony passed, we took his medals, Carol and I, and pinned him on a picture frame. Took him down there. And a month or 2 later, he called me. And what's his name? Dick something. Anyway, they said, come on down. I want to show you your brother's stuff. And I did. And he made a beautiful glass-covered case.
Wow.
Wood, gorgeous piece of wood. And up in one corner, you had the American flag, the other corner, his picture. And the medals, including the 1 Purple Heart.
Spectacular.
I don't know why I put 1 Purple Heart in there, but I had to keep the other one.
Yeah.
Now, Tyler, my grandson, his middle name is Anthony, named after my brother Tony. Tyler Anthony Cook, how about that? He always looked at that Purple Heart, and he'd look at it every time he came home or came, for a visit. Never said anything, just looked at it. So I knew he would like to have it. So this past Christmas, I said to Carol, I'm going to give it to him. And I did.
Yeah.
And it was in a case, and wow. He just thinks that was, and he took it to school,
Yeah.
show and tell, and then I punched out of the computer, history of the Purple Heart. And I gave it to him, and he took that, and he read parts of it. Kid is in the 3rd grade reading at the 8th grade level.
Yeah, wow.
Really. I'm not being a doting grandfather, but he is very, very bright. But he's very interested in the war. His uncle, my grandfather was there, his uncles were there, And a lot of kids don't care now. The little girl, she doesn't mean too much to her, except when she went down to the museum. I took her down there. I was amazed at how interested she was. Asked a lot of questions. What's this? So anyway, but she's a little tiger too. That's worth it being the doting grandfather here, but they are 2 very good kids and very bright. And having been in education for a couple of years, I know a bright kid when I see one.
When you got back here, just give me a quick kind of Reader's Digest of your bio. So you come back after the war.
I got home 2 days before Christmas. Now, I always wanted to be an engineer, particularly a civil engineer. I wanted to build things. That's what I in high school. If you look at my high school yearbook, where they have a little prize under there. You know what my nickname is? Killer.
Killer.
Yeah, and that goes back way when I was 10 years old. But anyway, high school.
I've heard people talk to you about that. I wondered why.
Well, I'll tell you why I got to. My father had a shed in the yard where he kept his garden tools and all that kind of stuff. And we took over half of it, made a clubhouse out of it. And I was the youngest guy in the club. And one day, the guys were in there playing the cards, and I started lighting matches. We had paper on the walls, and I stop it, you can't throw me out, I'm a member. Out I went. Walked in the back door of our house, the kitchen, grabbed a knife and just threw it. Just wound up and threw it. Right through the door, whizzed by my brother's nose. That was Joe. And so I walked down to the corner, and the guy in the corner called, "Hey, killer." That's how it got started. But it stuck. I don't think the high school principal really knew my name. But after I got home, and I said it was too late to try to get in a college, second semester. I went to work for Allegheny Ludlam Steel down here for that time. And I did interview at UB Engineering School. I never enlisted, never really applied, but I thought it'll come later. So I started school at Fredonia. just to see if I liked it. Well, I liked it. And a good time. I was doing very well. Having a lot of fun. I shouldn't say that. But at any rate, I really enjoyed railroading. And I was an assistant supervisor of track with no end, we had the track we're responsible for between Erie, PA and Buffalo. And Dunkirk was the headquarters. And we had two assistants. I was one and the other was the other. He was an engineer, graduate engineer. So he had the drive from Buffalo, Dunkirk to Buffalo, and I had Buffalo to Erie Depot, and Buffalo Gardenville Yards was the other. And I really enjoyed railroading, as I said. Well, within the year, the railroad had changed hands from the control by the Vanderbilt family to a guy named Kirby Young and his Allegheny Corporation. In the first year, he cut 28,000 jobs.
Yeah.
So I decided, what am I going to do? And it was in the summer, and it was too late to apply at UB. So the dean at Fredonia came and saw me. Look, come on, try talk me into going to Fredonia. So I did. And that's the rest is history.
So you graduated from Fredonia College.
Yes.
Was it then the Fredonia? Was it the normal school then, or was it SUNY Fredonia?
It became SUNY Fredonia. Before my time, it was normal school, but it became a teacher's college, and that was the official name. Then it became part of the university. But
Then you became a teacher and subsequently an administrator too, didn't you, Rocky?
I wanted to,
You were both a teacher and an administrator, right?
oh yeah. Well, I was administrator for most of my 30 years. Spent 30 years there. I went, the guy who I owe a great deal to, the superintendent, was named Bob Helmer, Robert D. Helmer. And he became superintendent after my second or third year. I'd have to go back and check the calendar. But I was JV basketball coach too.
Okay.
So in the old high school up here on the hill, in Dunkirk, the dungeon, the gym it was Christmas recess. And I was having basketball practice down there. And Bob Helmer walked in and said, I want to see you in my office after practice. What do I do now? I walked in the office and I was going to sit down in the chair. He said, tell me what your plans are for the future. I don't have any plans for the future. Well, I'm telling you right now, either you go to school and get yourself prepared for school administration or find yourself another job. Quote.
Wow.
Never forgotten it. So I started taking administrative courses, and again, the rest is history. I finally got my doctorate, as you know, from UB, and then climbed the ladder. One of the things I tell myself I'm proud of, but I never really am, I never applied for a single job. I was like, you're going to be it. You're going to be it. When I became superintendent, I was supposed to be on sabbatical to finish my doctorate. And in the summer, first week, now I did I was assistant then, assistant superintendent and high school principal at the same time. And I lost my train of thought, but get you back here. So I started summer school, and the first week was 4th of July weekend after the first week. And I'd have classes early in the morning at UB, worked in what they call a bullpen in the afternoon, had some sort of an assistantship. And then at night I'd go back to my office in Fredonia and work on some of the year-end reports that I did. The superintendent at that time was a guy who had visionary. I mean, he was a good guy, but he could care less about things like money, you know. And I don't want to belittle him, but he didn't care about much, let's put it that way. But he was a good guy. So it was the first week was over. Friday I came home from Buffalo, and Carol's parents were visiting that weekend. And I said, I have nothing to do, no homework, no this, no that. I'm caught up at school, just going to take it easy, play a little golf. That's Friday. 10 o'clock, the phone rang. Hi, this is Doug. I thought maybe you might come up for a minute. I thought it was this guy who often said, come on up for a beer. Oh, Doug, it's 10 o'clock. I'm very tired. I don't want... Well, the board and I were just sitting around the board. Doug Gormley, who was president of the board.
Oh.
So I got dressed and ran up to the school. Walked in, and there's the board sitting around, all but one. Clay Aiken, the superintendent, was there. I looked around, oh my God, what did I do now? And Doug Gormley says, well, we'll come right to the point. We've just accepted Clay's resignation, and you're going to be our new superintendent. Do I have anything to say about it? He said, well, what do you want to say? Well, nothing. He said, well, go home and tell your Carol you're going to sleep, if she wants to sleep with the superintendent.
Yeah.
So Clayton and I had just sparked. Well, it turned out he had given me a very high recommendation, which surprised me because we did spark a little bit with over money usually. But that was it, Friday night, and I had already started. What am I? I'm getting confused with later on. So that was it. I became the superintendent for 18 years, and finally decided to give it up. Time.
Just wanted to ask if it's getting too hot.
No, no. In fact, we got about 2 minutes left, and then Rocky has killed me. He's the killer.
So where was I? Anyway, where I finished pretty much.
Well, that's great. And how did they con you into doing the IDA?
All I know is I got called from David Dawson one day. No, Dick Lenzer was one of my principals. Jack Lenzer was county exec, and he makes the appointments. So he talked to David, and I was called by Jack, and went, well, IDA, what am I, that was a pretty big deal. So that's why I was appointed.
Give me your best IDA story. This is out of the blue, but with all those characters, think about them. It was Dawson and Sandberg.
IDA stories are the best story I have about the IDA happened after I left. After I was what I call this Monday morning massacre, when the new county exec took over.
Part time was here.
My time was up, and I didn't want to stay. In fact, I wrote a letter to the county exec at that time was Goodell.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I wrote a letter. I don't care to stay on the board. I'd been there 13 years. And Goodell answered me and said, no, don't resign now. Wait till after the election. Okay. Well, the word got out. That's beside the point. So then, of course, he was not elected, and whoever it was elected. But the best story I had, there was a guy in the labor was always talking. No, the guy on the board before this was a guy named Mike Sam, who was a big labor guy. And he left, I don't remember if he died or what, but I knew him, but I don't recall what happened to him. But anyway, labor said, that's our seat. Mm-hmm. We want a labor guy in there. Yeah. And the board resisted, and Dawson and the county exec resisted. And finally, Goodell said, hey, look, I got to appoint a guy. I really have to. Well, okay, you're the exec. So he appointed
Mike Piazza.
Mike Piazza. How could I ever forget that name? Mm-hmm. He appointed Mike Piazza, and Mike was, and I think still is, from what I've heard, a great guy.
Fabulous.
Great guy. He was a good board member. He never raised Cain and asked good searching questions. And can I tell a story about him after I left the IDA board?
Sure.
You can't put this in the board.
I'm not going to go.
I was told this by Joe Jackson. Joe was on the board then. Mm-hmm. Joe was also on the college council. Mm-hmm. I was at that time president of the college foundation.
Right.
And so the new president of the college, he just anyway decided that we'd get the two boards together and dinner and talk about. So we both have the college at heart. So Joe was there and I was there. So after the meeting, and I knew Joe, I said, Joe, how are you enjoying the IDA? I'm not. Now this goes on. This is not on tape. What's the matter? Well, Frankie Pagano was the chairman of the IDA, and he was appointed by the new county exec who was elected. And if you may recall, the early days of his appointment, he was up front of the IDA. Everything in the paper was Pagano. I saved IDA. I saved Altec, etc. and so forth. I said to Joe, how do you like the ideas? I don't. Ooh. And he brought that up. And he said, I got to tell you, Mike Piazza was furious with him. Mike and I and another guy, I don't know who it was, decided we had a meeting with Frank Pagano, and we told him to cool it. He said, what do you think this is? Or what do you think you are, a mafia don or something? I said, don't put that on the tape. But that's my fondest recollection of the IDA.
I remember that. I remember that time. Because I'm still involved with the IDA, so I carry a lot of crazy stuff.
Are you on the board or?
No, well, the attorney.
Oh yeah, right, of course. I forgot about that.
But yeah, Kevin does a very nice job. The boards, in fact, well, we'll talk about it there later. It's talking about you. Anything here I'm missing, Rocky?
You what?
Anything here that I'm missing?
Not that I can recall. I think it pretty much covered the waterfront.
Well, yeah, one thing I do want to just to conclude on this. You and Doug Manley go way back.
Way back.
Yeah.
And, I knew Doug well, and of course he lost his wife, as you know. And I knew him at that time, but we just knew him, that's all. So, that lovely lady out there came to town, and she rented a cottage on the lake with two other girls who were on the faculty. And that's when I started to date her, and actually I did date her before that, when she first came to town, and I put my mark on her, and that's it.
There you go.
At any rate, the next year, and in the meantime, Doug lost his wife. And next year, a lovely young lady from Ohio, or from, went to school in New York, Syracuse. She came, she was a guidance counselor. And James. And she rented the cabin next door to Carol and the other girls. And they became friends, and I had already been dating Carol at that point. Doug started dating Ann, and starting that year, even to today, Doug and I have spent, and Carol, of course, and Ann when she was alive, every New Year's Eve together for over 50 years.
That's terrific.
So we've become very close, and I used him as a sounding board when I was running a show at East Main Street. And he used me as a sounding board. I remember once when Red Wing was on strike, and Doug came to me with their proposal and said, "I'll see what you can do with this thing. Pick it apart, agree or do not agree." So we've been very close for all these years, and remain close. I have an awful lot of respect for him, an awful lot of respect. And in retrospect, I'm so glad that when Ed Steele sold the company, Doug was ready to leave before Ed stole the company. He tells me the story, and this is not publication either, but that he and Ed started a spark, and Ed sold the company, and Doug tells the story that the Brits, they sold it to the Brits, and when Ed told Doug, he said, "And you're going to be the new president of the company." And that was it. So Doug became president of Red Wing, and was, as you know, for a long time.
Yeah.
But he's done a great job there, and we got along very well, and he was a strong supporter of mine, and so was Ed Steele, as a matter of fact. Ed Steele was president of the Brooks Hospital Board. I was serving on that board, too, at the time. And when Ed sold the company, he decided he didn't want to remain as president. So we had a regular monthly meeting of the board. And he announced that he would not stay on as president. He would stay on the board, but not as president. So we're walking out of the meeting in the corridor in the lower wing of the hospital. Ed and George Weaver walking up, and I was behind him. Ed turned around and said, "And you little SOB, you're going to be the new president of the board."
Wow.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And whoa, wait a minute, what are you talking about? What about Weaver? No, I've talked to George. George never wanted to do that. He wanted to be a great guy, anyway, he was another great supporter of mine, as they all were. Weaver, when I think back at that time, Weaver, Steele, John Cook, Reed, Malcolm Reed, and so many great people in the community were all gone. And